The profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Oh, can't hear you yet, Jisho.
How about you made the face in the screen? Is that better?
It's still kind of faint.
Oh, Lord. How about if I leave in like this? Does that work better?
Well, you can go. I don't know if you've done this before, but you can go to your microphone and there's a little arrow up, and if you hit that, there's audio settings, and you can increase your microphone output.
Volume is max. Volume is max.
The microphone is max? Yeah, it's really faint. It's funny. Oh,
So, can you hear me?
not really.
Very faint.
I don't really know what's off the here. What are we going to do about that?
We'll get there. Maybe, do you want to try logging off and logging back on and see if that helps? Or Karina might have a suggestion. Do you have a thought?
I don't. I wish I knew better, but logging off, logging back on is a great idea. It fixes lots of
See you
things.
soon.
Okay. We're all patient Zen students. What if Jisho never makes it back? No, let's not go there yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Great.
Hear me if I don't stick my nose in the screen? Yeah? Ah, okay. Great. Okay. So, Elska and I were up north recently. We were staying about half an hour north of Fort Bragg at a little inn near Westport, right near the beach. It was very nice. And while we were there, I went up to see my friends, the Cistercian nuns in Redwoods Abbey in the Lost Coast in Whitethorn. That's where I like to go there on retreat because it's just them and me, and it's very silent. They do silence so well. So I went and visited, had a lovely time, and attended Mass. And the priest who led the Mass gave a short talk on faith. Now, faith makes many of us uncomfortable. I said to someone, I'm going to be talking about faith and awakening. They almost kind of had a reaction of what's faith having to do with awakening in our practice. It makes so many of us uncomfortable, I think, because of our Judeo-Christian shared background and sometimes the religions we grew up with, where the meanings of faith are about belief in God, belief in Christ, belief in a doctrine, maybe belief in dogma. And that kind of faith is out of step with Zen. So what I did for many years was I sent a faith to the circular file and didn't even think about it. Many years, decades, many decades. So this fall, several Sangha members are going to receive the precepts. They've studied the precepts and they're sewing rakusus. And an aspect of stepping forward and receiving the precepts is faith. Some kind of faith in what you're doing. Some kind of faith in the Buddha Dharma. But what kind of faith is that if it's not a matter of belief? I sat in my little cabin in the woods in the Berkshires, and I just sat zazen and read books, and that was fine with me for quite a while. And then I read, of course, that a teacher is really useful. In those days, they didn't talk about the importance of Sangha much. That's been a more recent, at least in the US, in the West, understanding of the jewel of Sangha. But at least there they were pointing to you needing a teacher, and I was pretty leery. But I went around and started meeting what teachers there were. And in the 1970s, early 80s, there weren't very many. So I probably met them all different traditions. And then I met Katagiri Roshi, who had come east just for a week. I sat a week in session with him, and he gave a talk. I liked him very much in this session. So this is possible. And then he gave a talk titled Faith in Zen Buddhism. And faith was a major bugaboo for me. I was a scientific atheist. But because I was so interested in him, I didn't feel dismissive. I was on the edge of my seat. What is this man going to say that might make sense to me, to someone like me? So the event was at a college, Hampshire College, and there was an auditorium with a big stage. And because it was a big empty stage and a rather small man, the organizers had put a table up there, sort of maybe for a lectern. And he was a very emotional and intense kind of guy. And so he talked and he gesticulated and he waved his arms. And at one point he got so excited that he leapt up onto the table and continued his talk from there. He so wanted to get this across to us. And he said in the course of this talk, in Zen Buddhism, faith is spiritual self-confidence. Now, some of you have heard me say this before because it made a huge impression on me. Faith in Zen Buddhism is spiritual self-confidence. So I was deeply relieved because I understood something from that. I understood that in practicing Zen, I would not be asked to take something on faith or without evidence. I would not be asked to subscribe to a dogma. And that was enough for me for a long time. But eventually I realized that although I understood what it meant, it wasn't, I didn't understand what he meant, what faith in Zen Buddhism did mean, what spiritual self-confidence meant. Of course, in a changing world, my understanding of what that means is changing. So this is where I am today. So the Hidden Lamp is a wonderful collection of, I think, 100 koans, stories from the classics, and short commentaries. And one of the stories is about the donut seller Yu Daopo. So Yu Daopo and her husband had made their living selling donuts and in their village. And one day, out delivering the donuts, and I always envisioned her with a big tray on straps. So she has this sticking out in front of her, and she can hand out donuts and receive money and go on her way with this great tray of her wares laid out in front. So one day, while out making donut deliveries, she encounters a beggar singing songs of the Lotus Sutra. And she's shocked. This is so completely different from her experience. And she's shocked into an awakening out of the narrowness of her life. And she doesn't know what she's awakened into. She overturns the donut tray over her husband's protestations. He says she's crazy. And she goes off to see the priest at the local temple. She's been a student of his, at least to some extent. Many people would go hear talks by their local Zen priest. So she goes to the priest seeking corroboration of this untoward experience. And moments of seeing clearly, widely, deeply, are so different from our usual busy mind with our life, our eyes fixed on the ground 2 feet in front of our feet. So we're just shuffling along through life and with blinders on because we're busy and we've got to keep focused. And these moments of seeing clearly can be transformational, or they can just kind of fade away. So going to the teacher was not just to have her awakening confirmed or checked, because that's sort of neither here nor there, but to express it and to exchange it, have an exchange with this priest in the realm of what this experience was. That helps broaden and deepen the experience and integrate it into her life. So this exchange in the realm of awakening begins to settle this experience, this differentness in her life, into who she is. Unfortunately, the story ends there. So what happens next? We play it forward. She can't bear to go back to her narrow life. So she leaves her husband and goes off into the mountains to be a hermit, aiming to digest her insight and to live in terms of it. Or, since we're writing the story, she goes back to her life and takes up the donut tray, but her experience has been changed, transformed. Her sense of herself, not just what happened, but her sense of herself is beginning to be changed. And she can go back and begin to live her ordinary life in terms of the extending awakening in her life, this awakening into reality. Does she go to the mountains? Does she go back to the village? Well, and also not in the koan, as I kept playing this forward. You know, if Yu Daopo has been making a living selling donuts, I think her mother was a donut seller before her and taught her the art of being a donut maven so that she really could make a living by it. If you make tough donuts, you're not going to get very far. So Yu Daopo's sister has also become a donut seller, like both daughters, in another town. And she too has heard the teachings. You know, they're in the air in China at that time. And she too encounters beggars as she's selling her donuts, but she never encounters a beggar who's singing the wisdom of the Lotus Sutra. She only meets beggars who ask for money or food. She doesn't meet anyone extraordinary. But over the years, because she is a steady sort, selling her donuts, over the years, the Dharma is in the air, there's a temple up the road, and the Dharma sinks in. And she comes to see that she lives in the Dharma world of peace and harmony. Although she is not herself always harmonious and peaceful, that is still the world she is in. While simultaneously living in the hungry, gossip-ridden world of her village and of her strife-torn country. So no great event happens, but over the years, as I say, the Dharma sinks in, and finally she feels that the Dharma has in some way penetrated her, and so she doesn't have words to express it. So she goes to the priest at her local temple to talk, once again, to have an exchange, to expand the way of understanding and experiencing her life. So he affirms her experience and her changes and her insight, and they talk. And she leaves. And she hasn't been in close communication with her sister, so what does she do with her transformation? Does she go into the mountains to be a hermit and digest her life that way? Or does she go back to her village as a donut seller, aiming to live in terms of the transformation that is slowly happening in her? Either way, she's changed. We are changed because the point of awakening is understanding change in our bones, beginning to change more gracefully because of our increasing acceptance that change is not just something that happens to us. It's not just how things are, but it's who we are. So is sudden or fast Yu Daopo better than slow, her two sister? Is the hermit in the cave holier than the woman in town? And what does it mean to live in terms of reality? So let me ask you, I can only see who's on my screen here though. I want to ask for a show of hands between she becomes a hermit and she goes back to her village. So who votes for Yu Daopo going off to be a hermit in the mountains? Raise hands. Just, we don't need the show buttons. Just, well, not a lot of people. This is not a monastic crowd. Funny thing. So how many would vote for her going back to her life in the village? Yeah, that's us. Overwhelmingly us. Yes. And it's not really that one is better than the other. They're equally valid paths. And in both cases, it's not easy to maintain the depth of what you're doing this for and what your life is about. Hermits live just as narrow-mindedly. All those cartoons of people going up to the hermit in the cave. Generally speaking, he doesn't have a very wide attitude when you get there. He's got one case, he's just a goldfish in a bowl. So the issue is not whether we go up to the mountains or live in the village, in town, but how we continue to change in terms of and in accord with the reality of life. How we continue to be informed by that and not to just forget. Which brings me back to spiritual self-confidence, because both directions, we hope, would lead the person to a life of spiritual self-confidence. Now, if faith is spiritual self-confidence, the word that's translated as faith is the Sanskrit word shraddha, which means either faith or confidence, or both faith and confidence, the confluence of faith and confidence. And it's sometimes translated as belief, but that's not really accurate. That's, again, a Judeo-Christian imposition on the word. So shraddha, faith, is mental clarity and a positive attitude toward the Dharma as the natural law of life and the world, and as the body of teachings expressing that. So it's a sense of conviction about following the Buddha way. It's Ushiyama Roshi would describe this as confidence that you're going in a true direction. He said, that's the one thing I've learned in my life, that I have confidence, deepening confidence that I'm going in a true direction in my life by walking the Buddha way. And this kind of confidence is not the same as personal self-confidence or personal self-esteem. Those are worthy in their own ways. It's confidence in something larger than your personal ideas about yourself and others. And not just about yourself, but about others. And but in this larger, inclusive world, you yourself are included. Walking into awakening to reality ever deeper, that's our participation in the Dharma. So walking not just through our lives, but into widening and deepening experiences of life and expressions of life. So confidence in the Dharma, when it's not just an idea, but a direction for your actual life, is confident in something vast that includes you. And so it will also support your personal self-confidence, because the person is walking the path. Your personal self is part of who it is that is walking the path and is deepened by that practice. When I started thinking about faith and awakening, I remembered there's a very important Chinese Buddhist classic that was very influential to Zen that's titled The Awakening of Faith in the Absolute. It could also be called The Faith of Awakening. It's the awakening of faith in an all-inclusive reality, each of us made of all the others, and each being as a germ or matrix of absolute inclusive reality. So just as each being is the matrix or the place of absolute inclusive reality, absolute reality in turn is nothing other than all beings as they truly are in themselves. So faith and awakening are one interpenetrated reality or truth. The book, The Awakening of Faith, says that awakening is an expression of faith, and that wisdom and compassion emerge on the ground of faith. And you could equally say faith is an expression of awakening, and wisdom and compassion emerge on the ground of awakening. Clarity and kindness are inextricably woven together, and each emerges from the other as the other. So Shraddha, spiritual self-confidence, naturally inclines us toward generosity and compassion. How could it not? Seeing that my heart is made of your hearts, seeing that my suffering is no other than your suffering, and that my suffering, when it is my personal suffering, helps me expand my understanding and awareness of your suffering. Endless flow into kindness, compassion, understanding. So what I'm trying to say here is that faith and awakening are two sides of one coin. They're two windows on the same reality of life. And that spiritual self-confidence is when we are aware of both sides of the coin of faith, awakening, and we are aware that they are one coin. There's a tradition in Zen that we've all inherited that privileges awakening over faith. In fact, often doesn't even talk about faith, but talks a great deal about awakening. But if you privilege awakening over faith, that's being trapped by ideas of a flashy enlightenment. And if you privilege faith over awakening without awareness of truth, faith is vague and useless, unfocused, undirected, unproductive. It's when they are understood to be linked, to be each emerging from the other, each deepening the other. And this faith awakening then is dynamic and active, and it takes shape as compassion, as service, as love, as understanding, as zazen, even as giving talks. We can approach in a sense, from either side, from the side of awakening or the side of faith. So I approached from the side of awakening. I sat Zazen for years. I've been sitting Zazen for 9 years before I received the precepts. It was partly because I was living in a hole in the woods, but not only. I was focused on Zazen and study, Dharma study. And those threads of Zazen and Dharma study then led me to Katagiri Roshi and led me to, when I met him, was the first time I discovered a Sangha that I could actually practice with less than an hour away. Valley Zendo was a tiny Sangha, but it was a wonderful one. And it was a place I could sit on Sundays all day and do sesshin every month. So I was moving toward the Dharma of Sangha and the Dharma of an emotional life and the Dharma of faith or self-confidence. And when these threads came together, for me, they came together as a sense of coherence in life. Just the practice of Zazen and Dharma study didn't do it. But it was what I was searching for. I was searching my whole life for a sense of coherence. It was sadly lacking. And it was the combination of Zazen and Dharma and then the emerging connection with the teacher and those exchanges I had with them and the connection with the Sangha and the sewing of the Rakusu and receiving precepts that brought me more toward a sense of coherence. And that was why I wanted to become a priest, because that coherence was the precious center of my life. And I wanted to live that way and find a way to share that. Although at that point, I must say, I was mostly thinking about how would I develop the sense of coherence. I didn't think I had anything to offer to anyone else. I probably didn't. But you can also approach from the other side. You can approach from the teachings and inspiration of Sangha. And you can approach in that sense from an awareness of impermanence and the brevity of life. You can approach from an understanding of interdependence. And someone just sort of woke up suddenly when she heard about Indra's net. It made so much sense. That's you enter from all, the Dharma is vast robe of emptiness. And we can enter from so many different sides. There are different gates to enter by as we start out, but as time goes by, they are one and the same path. Faith and awakening, not two, not separate. So I'd really like to hear from you. I'd like to hear, what is faith to you, or what is awakening, or does faith, are you comfortable with the word? Does even after my talk, is it just as uncomfortable as it was before? And what is confidence in the Dharma to you?
Well, I'll answer that. I'm so happy with your talk because Michael and I had a discussion about faith in just the past week. We were talking about, morning zazen because, now that we've been doing about a year and a half online, we're much more regular in and of course, there's a lot of days with zazen seems like just a bundle of my mind going everywhere and his mind going everywhere. And I said, you just have to have faith that this works. And it isn't just faith. It's like my experience builds the faith that I know there's a difference. And maybe there's a difference over time that my life is different when I'm sitting with a group every day. and I know, and I said, I know, and you're not supposed to, faith isn't a big thing in Zen, but I have to have faith in every aspect of my life. I couldn't plant a garden without faith. I couldn't do my exercises every day without faith. I couldn't do anything without faith. But it's not a faith of just, I accept everything. It is, I check it out. Does it work periodically? And then I was thinking, when you were talking about my conversation with Liz a couple weeks ago, in which I was very discouraged about Stone Creek, because there's so many problems right now. And Liz said, there's a group of us that are really solidly there. We need to have faith in them, and that they will carry us to the next phase. So thank you for talking about faith.
Thank you, Peggy. Brian.
Hello, everybody. What's come to mind for me along faith, because it's always been an issue for me as well, being more of a scientific bent. I was thinking back on my, somewhat troublesome adolescence, and I was always kind of negative. And if I think of faith as kind of a mindset, and to take just the glass empty, half full kind of idea, at some point in my life, I shifted from the half empty guy to the half full guy. And so I think that's sort of I see faith, because I have trouble with belief, and dogma and that stuff. But just as a helpful mindset, I've had more success with a more faithful or, half full mindset. And that way, it may not be quite right to look at, okay, I'm going to have a positive outlook, and then it just seems with a positive outlook, you have a better chance of having some sort of insight or flash of enlightenment or understanding of life. Whereas if you're in that dark mindset, just not able to see the light, it's probably not going to happen. Could you comment on that?
But what comes to my mind is an old Zen expression that walking in the mist, your sleeves get wet. Walking on the path, if we just, when we're mired in our own little world, it's very hard to switch from that half empty to half full. We must have had a number of experiences that helped make that shift. And one of them, for many of us, is trying Zazen or hearing the Dharma. And in one or the other side of that, finding something that sparks in your heart or rings some kind of a bell. And then we very tentatively put one foot forward. And the beauty of the Buddha way is it encourages a way to put another foot forward and another without having to doubt at each step, without having to take anything on belief. But there's a shape, a current, you might say. It's a way of entering a positive current and letting that help us, move us. So yeah, the glass half full. It's also like, it was Ajahn Chah, I think, who said, I appreciate this glass because I know it's already broken. It will be broken soon, so I understand it already as precious as it's already contains its brokenness in it. It is as it is. I will appreciate things, though they change and though they come and go. Something like that. Yeah.
I think for me also, it's a little bit of a scientific process of, well, I'll try that for a while and see if that theorem works out.
Yes.
And in general, I think it is better to look at the brighter side, in retrospect.
And sometimes we need help to find that brighter side. Even if we know it's there, it can be hard to find.
Yeah, and it's not to say the other side is not there, but it's sort of, I see it as a choice.
And so, and the Dharma is a way of encouraging that choice and giving a shape to that choice, moment by moment. Yeah. Thank you.
Jisho, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
It seems to me I'm also a very science-based person. If I can't find the source and see how it all comes together, then it's not something I can't take it on faith. Though on the other hand, I have faith that the sun's going to come up tomorrow. And that's based on a certain kind of scientific understanding of how it works. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. But I have faith that it will. It seems to me that we're really talking about faith in ourselves, in faith that my mind and my spirit are able to move forward and change and absorb this stuff. But it doesn't require me to believe in some supernatural being or growing up in an Orthodox Jewish tradition. It's not something I could, go back to, that kind of a philosophy. But I think that it's helpful to think of it as faith. I hadn't really considered it that way.
Well, think of it, you're part of the group that's doing the precepts, right? So you have already, for a long time before you met Stone Creek, developed confidence in Zazen, right? And then you've developed some confidence in this Sangha as a supportive structure for your own practice and for sharing or extending your practice. And then going towards receiving the precepts is a kind of faith that this is likely to help deepen and broaden your practice, because it's about extending the language of precepts, the language of taking our Zazen our practice off the cushion and out into the world, which is what the precepts are about. It's not doesn't matter if it's 10 or 16 or 22 precepts. It's expressing our practice and our understanding of the Dharma in a wider context. And the precepts are a way to help us do that. And so you look at it, you study the precepts a bit before you look at the song, you look at who's wearing a rakusu, and then you take a step on faith in a kind of, but not of belief and not one that hems you in. And if it should turn out to hem you in, you're not bound by it. You would set it down. So yeah, different ways we have. So you have faith in the sun coming up, not only through scientific understanding, but through your own personal experience. Since it's already happened every day of our life, we can't expect it to, and I hope and expect it to come up a few more times. Yeah. I didn't understand for many years with my scientific background that I was living these truths, and they were part of my life. They weren't just truths and ideas that I had or knew were facts or something like that. And they weren't just opinions, but they were somehow, I had taken them in. The molecular basis of life was something I studied when I was 5 and 6. My father was a scientist. So we develop these scientific truths into also being a personal truth. And that's a very interesting field to go into. Other thoughts on Roberta?
I wanted to talk.
Hi. Nice to see you. Lovely talk. Jisho, I'm reminded of the biblical saying, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things as yet not seen. And it is something I really love because I've had many experiences where everything seems to be falling apart. But in the midst of that, I am grateful that I recognize, as you talked about, clarity and faith are really one and the same, in a sense, in practice, and through experience. One learns this, that by being at kindness, if kindness is a complete revelation in the moment of when things are falling apart with someone or something, that you can remember kindness is still the way to manage that bad feeling or that interaction that's gone south. And it actually is hugely important to me and is a matter of faith. Certainly, I learned that in my own experience, but I come, as some of you know, from 25 years working with Berkeley Friends Quakers, and attending meeting and a silent meeting wasn't so much a biblical based meeting. It was really a meeting of people doing work together, committees, but there's this silent part of it that is meditation. And always through that form or Zazen or through my work with the Vipassana, it really still registers it when I set aside some time during the day to just be still, that something will arise. And it's not about enlightenment for me. I've always just thought of this as a practice of just experiencing something from a place of being and having faith. I just want to add, I used to live in outside of Whitethorn as a back to land person in Whale Gulch. And I know that Redwood Monastery well. We used to spend time there, and the sisters were always so wonderful. So thank you for sharing that too.
Thank you, Roberta. Edme, could you unmute and speak to us?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think in our society, we always thought somehow that scientific thought is superior to other thoughts, but science is not going to give us the meaning of life. And we are told from the beginning when we practice Buddhism that we don't have to believe anything, right? We just do it and see, as you say, whether it works. And the faith to me has a humbling effect, first of all. And then it also can prevent us to be too materialistic in terms of what we want, because it's never going to happen that way. And still yet we have to continue. So we have to have faith, because we are asked to continue something and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's the beauty of it. So that's how I look at faith. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jisho. I've said before in talks at the Sangha, but I'll say again that I found Zen and Buddhism at the same time as I entered an MFA program that was called Art and Consciousness. And that art program was all about the self and the whole in very similar ways that you're talking about. And it's been my experience that that my Buddhist practice and my art practice support each other in those kind of unspeakable ways, ways that can't be really put into words, but that when I'm falling away from one of them, for some reason, the other helps me find it back. And so I don't know. I guess I just feel really grateful that I have that much roundness in my life that can help, that two very important parts of my life can support each other and help me grow in both, actually. So I loved your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. So why don't we say maybe one last comment? And I see Liz's hand up because we have to then go on to our Sangha meeting. But Liz, let's hear from you.
And mute.
Yeah.
I just thank you for the talk. When I started sitting, I mean, I had, I guess what I want to say is it's so experiential, and I like, it's, for me, I didn't have to understand what the word Dharma meant or Buddhism meant. I could sit down and be with my, in a posture, and I could have an experience. And then for some reason I found I came back and did that again, not knowing why. And I would come back again and not know why. But my body led me back, or I just came back without knowing why. And I can't even elevate it to the word faith. That would be too proactive. I just, something pulled me back again and again. And I really like the word coherence, because if I felt some kind of changing over the years inside me, would be more of a sense of coherence that I think grew out of practicing. Yeah, and I think we always, I don't know, I think doubt has always been associated with faith. I mean, in Zen, we're in whatever messaging that doubt could be a friend of faith and always included and present.
The Dharma has always seen two kinds of doubt. There's what they call corrosive doubt. None of this is worthwhile. It's just terrible. You know, it freezes you. It's acidic and it corrodes. And the other kind of doubt is yours, is the inquiring mind. Oh, I'll try this. Oh, I'm not sure what it is, but I'll try it. I'll keep trying it. And for those who don't know, Liz is a charter member of the Zendo. She actually came knocking on my door before I even opened the Zendo, saying, "Are you opening a Zendo?" So that inquiring mind was there then, because I know you've been practicing with Catherine Thanis and other places, but here we were in Sebastopol. So that your inquiring mind took you beyond, it takes us beyond what we know or feel or think or faith. It's the inquiring impulse is foundational. Thank you, Liz. So let's go to the verse, the 4 Bodhisattva vows, and then we'll go on to our Sangha meeting. Okay.
All right. Okay, the vows are in the chat. 4 great Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it.